بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وتم التسليم على سيدنا محمد خاتم النبيين وإمام المرسلين وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. I hope you all well. Inshallah, in today's lesson we're going to cover several things. The first thing we're going to look at is the kind of virtues of the Quran in relation to households, reading Quran in the house, and also the person who recites it. We're also going to cover some internal aspects related to those things as well. And we will look at some of the adab, or maybe 9 different etiquettes of the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, for those who want to follow the Arabic, although I won't be reading all of it, parts of it I will be reading, you can turn to page number 45 from Al-Bayt alladhi yuqra' fihi al-Qur'an تحضره الملائكة ويتسع على أهله. So we'll begin with that topic inshallah ta'ala, and remember the whole point of this this class is to revive or to reconnect us all with the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, both in terms of reciting and to also learn a better understanding of Allah's book. Now we'll begin with some hadith, some narrations on the Quran being read in the home and the benefits that brings to the house. One of the big problems we do have is, I think it's also a modern problem with the amount of connectivity we have, internet, television, all of these things, is that we often lose kind of a spiritual connection with anything. So if you think about our Wi-Fi pretty much runs 24 hours long in the house, and we're almost always connected to it, and that's probably our only permanent connection that we have. When do we switch off and do something different? When do we read a book? When do we even talk to one another at times? But definitely, when do we switch off from that and connect with something that's beyond that? And the Prophet ﷺ said, as Imam Muhammad ibn Nasr al-Maruzi narrates with these chain from Anas, إن البيت إذا قرئ فيه القرآن حضرت الملائكة وتنكبت أي تباعدت عنه الشياطين وتصع على أهله وكثر خيره وقل شره، وإن البيت إذا لم يقرأ فيه القرآن حضرته الشياطين وتنكبت عنه الملائكة وضاق على أهله وقل خيره وكثر شره. There is some discussion on the chain of the hadith, but the meaning of the hadith is as follows: that the Messenger of God is purported to have said that a house, إذا قرئ فيه القرآن, that the Quran is recited in, حضرته الملائكة, that angels visit that house, وتنكبت أي تباعدت عنه الشياطين, and the devils or the evil spirits are warded off, وتصع على أهله وكثر خيره, that the house becomes full of goodness and barakah, وقل شره, and the house has very little problems or evil. وإن البيت إذا لم يقرأ فيه القرآن, and a house that doesn't have the Quran read in it, evil. See, when the word shayateen is mentioned in a lot of these hadith, we come to realize that it can mean many things. It could mean the fact that the energy in that house is unsettling. It doesn't necessarily mean that jinnat, and that's another topic altogether. What does that mean? When we say, oh, there's jinnat or evil spirits or this type of shayateen, but it means here that evil energy, to a large degree, that tension, etc. as well, it refers to that as well. And the angels do not enter that house, or are not present, and the goodness in that house is very little. وَكَثُرَ شَرُّهُ, and the problems in that house are, you could say, multiplied, or you have a lot of problems in that house. In another hadith, the Messenger of God ﷺ said, أكثر من تلاوة القرآن في بيوتكم فإن البيت الذي لا يقرأ فيه القرآن يقل خيره ويكثر شره ويضيق على أهله. That read plenty of the Book of Allah in your houses. أكثر من تلاوة القرآن في بيوتكم, for indeed a house that does not have the Quran recited in it, يقل خيره, that its barakah, its blessing, its goodness of that house will be very little. ويكثر شره, and the problems in that house will be many. وَيَضِيقُ عَلَى أَهْلِهِ. وَيَضِيقُ عَلَى أَهْلِهِ could mean here that There are a lot of issues related to the family and tensions between one another. Others can translate the وَيُدِيكُ عَلَى أَهْلِهِ in terms of money, but I think it's better to see as issues within the house. In another hadith, the Messenger of God said from Aisha radiallahu anha, البيت الذي يقرأ فيه القرآن يتراءى لأهل السماء كما تتراءى النجوم لأهل الأرض. That a house in which the Quran is recited, the people of the heavens or other realms can see clearly as we see the stars in the sky. Well, not in this country, but in another hadith, the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said, إن بيوتات المؤمنين لمصابيح إلى العرش. That the houses of the believers are like lamps. Their light reaches to the throne of God. And the seven universes, or their يعرفها مقرب السماوات السبع. That all those entities that are there, that therein know about the house. يقولون هذا النور من بيوتات المؤمنين التي يتلى فيها القرآن. That this is light that's come from the houses of the believers. It could be in another realm, another dimension. It doesn't mean that this not to be taken literally. These are the houses of those who recite the book of Allah. Now, I want to talk a little about the great benefit in reciting the Quran, and a very, very interesting hadith in which the Messenger of God sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the different degrees of people, or talks about certain elements of certain types of people, and he talks about how camels were kind of very important to people in those days, worth a lot. Could compare them to cars now, something of that kind. And he said, alayhi salatu, فَيَتَعَلَّمُ أَوْ يَقْرَأُ, a person who gets up in the morning and goes to the masjid, and he learns the book of Allah, even 2 verses from the book of Allah. خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ نَاقَةٍ, it's better for him than 2 camels. وَثَلَاثٌ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ, and 3 verses greater than the value of 3 camels. وَأَرْبَعٌ خَيْرٌ لَهُ مِنْ أَرْبَعٍ, and 4 more than 4 camels. Or however many camels you can mention. And the idea is here is that learning, and that's why you could say that the famous hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, خَيْرُ النَّاسِ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ, that the best of people are those who learn the Quran and then they teach it to other people. Now I want to look at kind of an important topic to do with parents and kids and the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. First question is, should we encourage our children to memorize the Quran and I'll talk about the different degrees of memorization, of hifz. And also maybe we should talk about, should we memorize the Quran here? I think that'll probably be important as well. First and foremost, I'll start with us. If you're an adult, well, most of the people logging in I assume are, a certain amount of Quran must or is necessary for everybody to memorize. You must know at least 1 surah, the very least, otherwise you wouldn't be able to pray the salah. But generally speaking, one should know at the minimum, absolute minimum, the last 10 surahs of the Quran, and that's a beginning point. And if you're not there, then maybe learn 3 surahs and build up to 10. And after that, you should try to memorize the rest of the juz', the rest of that chapter of the Quran, the 30th chapter, to memorize all of it. Now, I would argue that memorization of the 30th chapter is sufficient for most people. It's good enough for most people, I would argue. And if one wants to go beyond that, 2 surahs are very important in the Quran to memorize. One of them is Surah Al-Mulk, Tabarak alladhi biyadihi al-mulk, the other is Surah Yasin. These 2 are very, very important. And whatever you want to memorize after that, Fakhr Baraka, it's good. As for those who wish to memorize the whole Quran, and they've, they're not spring chickens, they've, their particular age, then you should probably think to yourself, if you can dedicate the time to memorize more of the Quran or even the whole Quran, then definitely do it if you can do that. However, I would say it's not memorizing the whole Quran is not as important as understanding the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. By that I mean, if you're going to memorize and spend all your time making hifd of the Quran and not understand any of it, then your hifd, although it's a good thing, you can maybe lead tarawih, things of that nature, but you've missed the purpose of the Quran. The purpose of the Quran is to biyan li kulli shay, is to give an explanation to all things, is tadabbur, tadakkur is to reflect, to remind others. So it would defeat the purpose just to memorize it without understanding it, and I would give more time to understanding than memorizing it. It's a fard kifaya for a group of people within the community to memorize Quran, and if a group of people do not memorize the Quran, or some people within a community, the entire community is considered, I would argue, considered sinful. So we always have to produce some hufad. The problem that we have, of course, maybe I don't want to criticize the masajid or the madrasas, I'm sure they do good work, but the masjids should be teaching as part of their course of hifad, they should make it wajib, meaning necessary upon every single person, child, teenager, adult, wherever it may be, that memorize the Quran, that they should make it wajib, absolutely necessary that they learn the Arabic language. Why? Because if you can spend 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 years memorizing the Quran, you can definitely give a year to learn the Arabic language so you understand what you've memorized. If they're not doing that, then they've essentially, I would argue to a degree, they're not fulfilling the entire obligation. They're only fulfilling part of it. An easy ways to memorize the Quran is, if you're struggling, even pick one verse a day, and you'll have 7 verses a week. But definitely begin with the shorter surahs, which is Amma, and learn them. Why? Because the salah is a munajat. The salah is it's a conversation between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if you're going to stand in prayer and you only have Surah Al-Ikhlas, you don't have much to say in your prayer. So memorize something of substance, that's a page long at least, maybe a little more than that, so that you can recite that in your prayer. In terms of children, if your children can memorize the Quran, do never force your children to memorize the Quran, ever. Don't, if they don't want to do it, or if they're clearly showing signs that they don't enjoy it or they don't like it, and they're building a disdain, and it's affecting their life, then don't make them memorize the Quran. However, if you can encourage them in a good way, and they have some meal, they have some a mail towards it, you have some inclination towards it, then definitely, it's an asset, it's a good thing for somebody within your family to have memorized the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but follow that up with the Arabic language. But don't force your children and push them through a system where they end up really disliking what they've done. If you look in Birmingham, take for instance, many of those children, when I was in masjid, when I was younger, that were in the hifad class, majority of them have forgotten the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, forgotten it. And it wasn't a good system. Should have been developed more and funded better. And so that's my advice. And if you have a child that has some inclination towards memorizing the book of Allah, definitely put them through that. But remember, don't force them, and build a love for the Quran within them. Now, there's a hadith of the Messenger of God, alayhi salatu wasallam, narrated by Abu Dawood, and I want to talk about a slightly controversial topic here, or a controversial hadith. But before that, he said, alayhi salatu wasallam, man qara al-Quran wa amila bih. He who recites the Quran and acts by it. Okay. Albasa Allah ta'ala walidayhi tajan yawm al-qiyamah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place a crown on the head of that child's parents on the Day of Judgment. Daw'uhu ahsanu min dawi shams. That the light of that will be greater than that of the light of the sun. في بيت من بيوت الدنيا لو كانت فيه وما ظنكم بالذي عمل به. And then the Messenger of God said, to add to that, he said, what of one who then goes on to act upon the Quran? There's a really interesting hadith. Many people think that there are only 3 questions in the grave, which is famously narrated in many Sahih hadith. But there is another hadith which is also sound, which is narrated by Sayyidina Abu Hurairah, in which the person in the grave is asked. There are differing variations of the hadith, so I'll give both of them. In one variant of the hadith, the Messenger of God said that the angel, alayhi salatu wasalam, said the angel in the grave, or the angels, Munkar and Nakir, will ask the person, ma ilmuka. And in another variation, it's ma amaluk. Now bear in mind that ilm and amal, both of those words have ain, lam and mim. So it could be possible that the narrator mixed the words up. Or it could be that they're 2 separate incidents. One means what was your knowledge, and the other is what was your practice. The words are very close. Now, in both the replies are the same, so it seems it could be an issue with the chain, the wording. And the person replies, قرأت القرآن, I read the book of Allah, وصدقت به, I read the book, recite the book of Allah, and I testified to it. Now, imagine that question is, what did you do in the world? Ma amaluk, what was your practice? And he said, قرأت القرآن وصدقت به, I read the Quran, I followed it through. Meaning whatever was in it, not only believed it, but I put it into practice. Now, according to these narrations, that's a 4th question in the grave. So, and that's how important it is to take lessons from the book of Allah and to inculcate them. Now, there's another hadith, interestingly enough, this hadith is also mentioned by Sheikh Abdullah Sirajuddin in this text. However, I'm going to give my take on that narration. That narration, according to Mullah Liqari, the great Hanafi scholar, in his Mawdu'atul Kubra, and others have declared another hadith that I'm going to mention to be fabricated or to be extremely weak, maybe munkar. And that is that a narration that he who memorizes the Quran takes 10 people from his family or his household to Jannah. Many people send their kids to the masjid and they memorize the Quran, and they'll say, oh, alhamdulillah, my seat is booked in Jannah, I'm done for. Alhamdulillah, no worries. I think that's a little too easy. That hadith is not a valid hadith to use, I don't think, number one. And number two, the wording in the narration, even if we were to accept it, is not one who memorizes the Quran. It's hamil. And we're going to get to what does it mean to memorize the Quran? Who is a hamil of the Quran? Not a hafiz, that's another word. And we're going to look at that in a short while, inshallah ta'ala. In another hadith, the Messenger of God, alayhi salat, but the point of the earlier hadith was how the parents are rewarded for going through that tarbiyah of their child and putting them through that, and that hard time of pushing their children to learn and to memorize the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, taking them to lessons, taking tajweed lessons, taking the lessons of ilm, and things of that kind. The parents are thoroughly rewarded for that. In another hadith, the Messenger of God said, alayhi salatu wasalam, who the best of people are. He said, Rawa Imam Ahmed narrates, Rawa Imam Ahmed, وطبراني عن ضرة رضي الله تعالى عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال خير الناس أقرأهم وأفقههم في دين الله وأتقاهم لله وآمرهم بالمعروف وأنهاهم عن المنكر وأوصلهم للرحم. And I want to spend a little bit of time on all of these categories. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best person from you is أقرأهم. The best person, the best خير الناس is أقرأهم, the one that's the most well read. And this is in reference to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, this has with it the caveat that he practices, not only does he know the book of Allah, because there are non-Muslims out there that know the book of Allah as well, very well, better than some Muslims, but he follows through with that. وَأَفْقَهُهُمْ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ. Number two, following on from that, or with that, the one who understands God's religion the best. Not somebody who has the most money or somebody who has, a particular standard amongst his relatives or kinfolk. Nothing of that nature. أَفْقَهُهُمْ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ. If you look now today, scholars of Islam, ulama, are amongst the poorest people and often considered to be people who are of not much importance. When the true scholars of Islam, they spend all of their lives reading, researching, teaching, libraries worth of books, and giving guidance, And that's the essence of it. In the hadith of the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, when it was said that the inheritance of the Prophet sallallahu is being handed out in the masjid, people ran to the masjid thinking that we may get some relics, some of the holy relics of the Messenger of God, his shirt maybe one of his overcoats, but they found nothing of that nature. They found people teaching the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the sunnah of the Messenger of God, and that's the inheritance that he left. Next, the Messenger of God said, "Atqahum lillah," the ones who are most God observant or God aware of God. Then, "Amarahum bil ma'ruf," the ones that enjoin in good, or amarahum bil ma'ruf, enjoin in good the most. Now, then he mentioned anhahum anil munkar, and the ones who shun or push away evil the most. I want to mention these two categories very briefly. This idea of al-amru bil ma'ruf wa nahi anil munkar, commanding good and enjoining in good and forbidding evil. The one condition for this is that there's several conditions for it. Firstly, the person must know what he's prohibiting or what he's enjoining. You can't tell other people to do something when you yourself you're lacking knowledge. Number two, it must so you must know yourself. Number two, you must know and you must be practicing that particular thing also. You must also be enjoining in that. Number three, it must be with absolute and utmost wisdom. Is it necessary to say such a thing? Am I saying it for my ego, for my arrogance? Or is it something that would truly benefit somebody? Am I sincere about that? And often, people, especially the layman, makes comments and things of that nature. If you don't know, or if the ulama have khilaf of something, then people don't really have right to talk about those types of things. I'll give you one simple example. Reading the Quran as we're on the Quran collectively. Collective, like khatams of the Quran, where people come together and they read a juz each of Quran for the deceased. Is that a valid practice or not? If you're not from the people of ilm and you follow a particular school or an idea, that's fine for you. But to tell somebody else that they're wrong, not knowing the opinions amongst the ulama, is impermissible for you. And calling it innovation or something of that nature. The ulama differed over this topic. The majority, I will argue, said it's praiseworthy to read the book of Allah for those who have passed away. So my point is that everybody needs to stay within their limit, within their standard. And if somebody's really pushed and wants to speak about the religion, then you must go through the hard work of studying the religion correctly for that amount of years to be able to have the right to speak about certain things. And then the Messenger of God said, وَأَوْصَلَهُمْ لِلرَّحِمِ, the one who mends, fixes ties amongst family members. Rahim is the best one of the. These are the description of the best of people. The one who fixes broken relationships amongst family members. Next, the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said, and this is the honor of somebody who knows the Quran. قال النبي, Imam Muslim narrates, قال النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام قال رسول الله عليه الصلاة والسلام يا القوم أقرأهم لكتاب الله تعالى. The one who leads the people in prayer is the one who knows the Quran the most. There is a difference on this issue, that what if somebody has memorized Quran but doesn't understand it, and there's somebody who's memorized less and is more knowledgeable of the deen. In that case, the one more knowledgeable about the deen should lead the salah, because he possibly knows all of the permutations of or different instances that may occur in the prayer, maybe a mistake of some kind or things of that nature, and how to fix that. In another narration, and it's a wonderful hadith about when people died in Uhud, and the Prophet ﷺ, when they passed away, was burying them one by one. And the way that he ordered their burial, who will go in first, will have the most sharaf, will be buried first. And he said, أيهما, if there were two people, أكثر أخذا للقرآن فإن أشير إلى أحدهما قدم بالأحد, that he would ask which of these two people is the most knowledgeable in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then when they would point to that person, he would say, bury that one first. Bury that one first. That the sharaf was always given to somebody more knowledgeable in the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Next, about respecting and honoring, you could say, the signs of God. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَمَنْ يُعَدِّمْ, this is on page 50 if you're following the book, إِكْرَامُ أَهْلِ الْقُرْآنِ مِنْ تَعْظِيمِ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ, that to honor those, the people of the Quran, because they are from the sha'air Allah. You could say almost like from the signs of God. مَنْ يُعَدِّمْ شَعَائِرَ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ, that he who honors, magnifies sha'air Allah. Now what are sha'air Allah? Things that are like signs of God, things that remind one of God. And this is from فَإِنَّهَا مِنْ تَقْوَى الْقُلُوبِ. This is from the taqwa of people's hearts. What are the sha'air? The Shaykh breaks them down into two types. He says, number one, فَمَعَالِمُ الدِّينِ, things that the religion is known for, signs of the religion. The first one he mentions is تَشْمَلُ الْمَصَاحِفَ الْقُرْآنِيَّةِ, is the Book of Allah. Now, one thing I've seen as the years progress, since I've been a child anyway, that the respect for the Book of Allah and its maintenance has slowly diminishing. Now there are two extremes to this. The one extreme is that we have absolute adab for the Book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So one is that we wrap the Book of Allah in a ghilaf of this kind, or something that's nicely sewn, and we place the Book of Allah and beautify its kind of presence on our bookshelves, etc. And that's a wonderful thing to do, and that's from the adab of the Quran. However, if you just put it in the ghilaf and you put it on the bookshelf and it stays there, the main central purpose of the Book of Allah is lost. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't say in the Book of Allah, put the Book of Allah in a ghilaf and keep it clean and tidy and put it on your shelves and nobody read it. And that's a very, very big problem. That's one extreme. The other extreme is people who, yes, they read the Book of Allah, but at the same time they don't maintain or look after of adab for the book itself, the way it's maintained, to give its due right in terms of etiquette. So there should be a balance of both things. Number two, simple things we're going to get to a little later, but things that you don't put the Book of Allah on the floor. That's something you don't do. The floor is somewhere where people walk. The Book of Allah is وَقَلِمَةُ اللَّهِ الْعُلْيَةِ, the lofty word of God. You don't put it on the floor. You have adab for it. Even when you're sitting and you're reading, it's not something that I would argue that you just put on your lap. If you're going to read from the mushaf itself, hold it with your hand, or have something like a rail or something of that kind that you put it on. Another point is teaching our children to look after the Book of Allah. How many times do we not look after the Book of Allah and pages get ripped, and then we just go to the masjid and just leave masahif there, and they're leaving it as a problem for the masajid. So people should be very careful, cognizant of not doing things of that nature. Now the adab of the Quran is twofold. One, the way we carry it, and two, the fact that we give it its due right to read it. Now, so it includes the Quran. Number two, masajid salawat, also one of the great signs of God are the masajid, and we know that now that they're closed, it's as if something's been taken away from us after all this time. Next, it's a manasik of Hajj as well, the pilgrimage, the things that we do, like throwing stones, the tawaf, the resting at Muzdalifah. All of these things are signs, great signs of this religion, signs of God. Then the Shaykh mentions the second type and says, وَحَمَلُةُ شَرِيَاتِهِ, that another great sign of Allah Jalla wa'ala, one of the signs of God, is those people who carry His religion in the world. تَشْمَلُ الْعُلَمَةِ وَالْقُرَّاءِ, and that includes the scholars, and it includes the people who recite the Quran, the reciters. قد استدل الإمام النووي عنه بهذه الآية الكريمة على وجوب إكرام أهل القرآن. Imam Nawawi derived from this verse that we read that one must honor the people of the Quran لأنهم من شعائر الله تعالى, because they're from those signs of God. كما يجب تعظيم العلماء الذين هم حملة دين الله, just like one respects the ulama as they are the carriers or the bearers of God's religion. And one should not ولا يجوز إيذاؤهم one should not harm them. وَلَا تَحْقِيرُهُم, nor should one belittle them. وَلَا الِاسْتِهَانَةِ بِهِمْ, or like make fun of them. Look, ulama differ amongst each other, and often they probably, or sometimes they go overboard as well. But generally speaking, we shouldn't make fun of people anyway, and especially people of ilm and knowledge and pious people if they are pious. وقد نقل الإمام النووي عن الإمامين الكبيرين أبي حنيفة والشافعي. Imam Nawawi narrates from Imam Shafi'i and Abu Hanifa, who both said the following: إن لم يكن العلماء أولياء الله تعالى فليس لله تعالى ولي. That the people who are ulama, who know the religion and these stuff, if they are not the people of God, then nobody is. There's another point as well. Ibn Asakir mentions that, which is a very important point, that you know the famous hadith on backbiting. It's like eating the flesh of your brother. He says that inna luhum al-ulama masmuma. Backbiting the ulama is like eating poisoned meat. It's even worse. And he mentions that it's the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the way of Allah, that somebody who talks about the people of knowledge and the people of Allah, the people of God, in a negative way, that Allah sends them an ibtila. He sends them a great punishment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala فَيَحْتَرِ الَّذِينَ يُخَالِفُونَ عَنْ أَمْرِهِ أَنْ تُصِيبَهُمْ فِتْنَةٌ أَوْ يُصِيبَهُمْ عَذَابٌ أَلِيمٌ. That be warned about those people who go against the commands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that they be inflicted with a fitna, or they be inflicted with a great punishment. Now that's really interesting, even in the light of the coronavirus, that is it a fitna, or is it adabun alim, or is it an adab? Allah knows best what it is. Allah ta'ala knows best. But we can definitely say that, you know, the state of affairs that our ummah is in and how we've turned away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it has the very least a fitna for us, a great test and trial for us. Next, I want to move on to the shafa'ah, the intercession of the Quran for the people on the day of judgment. The Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam said, عن جابر رضي الله تعالى عنه قال عن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال القرآن شافع مشفع ومحل مصدق من جعله أمامه قاده إلى الجنة ومن جعله خلفه ساقه إلى النار. Ibn Hibban narrates this narration, that hadith, that the Quran on the day of judgment will be an intercessor. He who places the Quran in front of him to take him, it will place it in front of him, it will take him to Jannah. He who places the Quran behind him, it will push him into the hellfire. Now, in another narration, the Messenger of God alayhi salatu wasalam, so the Shaykh mentioned some important things. He said, وَشَفَاعَةُ الْقُرْآنِ لِلْقَارِئِ قَدْ تَكُونُ بِمَغْفِرَةِ الذُّنُوبِ وَقَدْ تَكُونُ بِرَفْعِ الدَّرَجَاتِ الْحِلْيَةِ بِالْكَمَالَاتِ. Sometimes, on the day of judgment, it's one case where the shafa'ah, the intercession of the Quran, is for the forgiveness of one's sins, one. Or maybe that person is a good person and it will give them extra reward, raise their rank. So he says, fa'ula, number one, i.e. Forgiveness of sins. يدل عليه ما رواه الترمذي وأبو داود وغيرهما عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه عن النبي عليه الصلاة والسلام. That Abu Huraira narrates a hadith from the Messenger of God. إن سورة من القرآن 30 آية شفعت لرجل حتى غفر الله له. That on the day of judgment there is a surah that has 30 verses that will intercede for a person on the day of judgment, such that God will forgive him. And that surah is تبارك الذي بيده الملك. In another narration, that Surah Al-Mulk is the surah that will prevent the punishment of the grave. Now, in another narration by Imam Tirmidhi, that, and this is to do with what if a person is already good, what would they receive? That يجيب صاحب القرآن يوم القيامة فيقول القرآن, that it will be said to him, a person who comes in the day of judgment, it says that the Quran will say to him, it means something representing that. It says, "Oh my Lord, beautify him, and Allah will give him Tajul Karama, the crown of nobility, the crown of nobility. And then it continues, it says, oh Allah, increase, give him more. فَلْيُلْبَسُوا حُلَّةُ الْكَرَامَةِ. Then he's given the clothes of nobility. The clothes of nobility. Then the Quran says, Ya Rab, irda anhu. Oh Allah, be pleased with him. فَيُرْضَ anhu. And God is, فَيُرْضَ anhu. God is pleased with him. Now, the next section, I'm moving on to page 58 for those who are following the Arabic now. And to talk about what happens when we read the Book of Allah. That peace, that serenity. But is there something that happens beyond, in a realm that we can't see and witness? The Prophet said, as narrated by Imam Muslim in a long hadith, he said, مَا اجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِّن بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ يَتْلُونَ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَيَتَدَارَسُونَهُ بَيْنَهُمْ إِلَّا نَزَلَتْ عَلَيْهِمُ السَّكِينَةُ وَغَشِيَتْهُمُ الرَّحْمَةُ وَحَفَتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنْ عِندَهُ. That those people, and I'm going to discuss this hadith in more detail later on today, those people who gather in the house of God and they read the Book of Allah and they study it amongst themselves, a great tranquility will descend upon them and they will be covered in mercy, in the mercy of God, وَحَفَتْهُمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ, and surrounded by angels. وَذَكَرَهُمُ اللَّهُ, and God will mention them to the فِي مَنْ عِنْدَهُ, to whoever he communicates with, or to the closest heaven, or whichever that may be. But there's another really interesting hadith of the Prophet ﷺ and some of the Sahaba and effect of the Quran. So this story is narrated by Bukhari from Usayd ibn Hudayr radiyallahu anhu. And he talks about one day reading Surah Al-Baqarah. It's quite an interesting story actually, about the effect of Surah Al-Baqarah. And he writes, or he states, one day I was reading Surah Al-Baqarah. It's a Sahabi Jaleel. And my horse was tied. And all of a sudden, my horse began to, it became startled, or began to panic when I was reading the Book of Allah. فَسَكَتَ أَمْسَكَ عَنِ الْقِرَاءَةِ. So he said, I stopped reading. فَسَكَنَتِ الْفَرَسِ. And the horse, it stopped moving. It stopped panicking. It stopped getting scared. فَقَرَى فَجَالَتْ. So he began again, and the horse then started, became startled again. And then he states, ثُمَّ قَرَأَ فَجَالَتْ. Then he read again, and the horse began to do the same. فَكَانَ ابْنُهُ يَحْيَى. His son Yahya was close by. مِنْهَا فَانْصَرَفَ فَأَخَرَهُ. This horse was close to him, and it was panicking to such a degree that it almost trampled upon him. He almost stepped all over him. Then he writes, or he states, that ثُمَّ رَفَعَ رَأْسَهُ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ. Then he said, I looked up and I saw some, like فَإِذَا مِثْلُ ذُلَّ, like something dark that was hovering in the sky. I couldn't make it out. Meaning a particular cloud that was covering that particular area. فِيَا أَمْثَالُ مَصَابِيحِ. And within that cloud, I could see many small lights. Many small lights. When he woke up, he went to the Messenger of God ﷺ. And فَلَمَّا أَصْبَحَ حَدَّثَ النَّبِي. He told the Messenger of God ﷺ, look, I was reading, my horse was startled. Then I looked up and I saw this cloud, and I saw all these lights within the cloud. فَقَالَ النَّبِي صلى الله عليه وسلم. The Messenger of God said, وَتَدْرِ مَا ذَاكَ. Do you know what that was? قال لا. He said, I don't. فقال صلى الله عليه وسلم تلك الملائكة. They were angels, دنت لصوتك, that came lower after hearing your voice, after they heard you reading the Quran. ولو قرأت لأصبحت ينظر إليها الناس لا تتوارى منهم. He says, if you carried on reading and the people looked up, they would have seen the angels of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the sky. And there are similar other narrations for that as well. In another riwayah, تِلْكَ مَلَائِكَةَ نَزَلَتْ لِقِرَاءَةُ الْقُرْآنِ. They are angels that descend when they hear the Book of Allah being read. وإما أما إنك لو مضيت, if you had just continued a little bit, أو لو بقيت على قراءتك لرأيت العجائب, if you had only waited and carried on reading and looked up, you would have seen many wonders, you would have witnessed many wonders. And that hadith is a sound hadith and rated by Imam Bukhari. The Messenger of God in another hadith where one of the companions was reading Surah Al-Kahf, again rated by Imam Bukhari, كان الرجل يقرأ سورة الكهف, he was reading Surah Al-Kahf, وإلى جانبي حصان مربوط بشطنين أي بحبلين, a horse was tied with 2 ropes next to him. فَتَغَشَّتْهُ الصَّحَابَة, and he saw this cloud hovering above him, and it was coming lower and lower. تقرب من مكان القارئ وجعل فرسه ينفر, that the horse began to like panic. فلما أصبح أتى النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, when he woke in the morning, he went to the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, and the Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم, تلك السكينة تنزلت للقرآن, that's a tranquility, something tangible that descends when the book of Allah is recited. Next, the Messenger of God said about those whose houses are full of the book of Allah, the reading, he said عليه الصلاة والسلام, نوروا منازلكم بالصلاة وقراءة القرآن, that fill your houses with light, the light of prayer and the reciting of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, in the section, the Shaykh mentions Allah ta'ala yuhibbu man yatlu kitabahu fil layl. Allah loves the person who reads his book in the night time, in the evening. The Messenger of God said, alayhi salatu yuhibbuhumullah, that 3 people who God loves, one of them, rajulun, a person, qama min al-layl yatlu kitab Allah, he stands in the night and he recites the book of Allah. This could be in reference to tahajjud, but because the word yatlu kitab Allah is mentioned, then the general ruling is also given. Now, next we move on to is the study of the book of Allah. I said I'll return to the topic of the earlier hadith. So فضل الاجتماع on page 63 على تلاوة القرآن الكريم ومدارسته, that the virtue of gathering to read the book of Allah and its study. The Prophet ﷺ, and I'll narrate hadith in full, states, and this is narrated by Imam Muslim from Abu Hurairah رضي الله تعالى عن النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قال من نفس عن مؤمن كربة من كرب الدنيا نفس الله عنه كربة من كرب يوم القيامة, that he who من نفس عن مؤمن, who removes the difficulty from his brother from the dunya, God will remove a difficulty from him on the day of judgment. And يسر على معسر يسر الله تعالى في الدنيا والآخرة, he who eases a believer's affairs, and we're going to talk about what the word ease means here. God will ease somebody who's in a difficulty, God will ease his affair on the day of judgment. Man satara musliman, he who covers a Muslim's sins, I would argue. This means God will cover his in the dunya and in the akhirah. The Messenger of God then said, Allah is at the aid of his brother as long as at the aid of his servant, as long as the servant of Allah is at the aid of his brother. Then he said, alayhi salatu wasalam, he who treads the path in which one seeks knowledge, Allah will ease his path to Jannah. Then the Messenger of God said, وَمَا اجْتَمَعَ قَوْمٌ فِي بَيْتٍ مِنْ بُيُوتِ اللَّهِ, they're not a group of people that meet, that gather together in the house of God, reading the book of Allah and studying it together, except that tranquility descends upon them, and God's mercy envelops them, and the angels surround them, and Allah mentions them to he who is close to him. And then the Messenger of God said, "Man batta'a bihi amaluhu lam yusri bihi nasabu." Somebody who is slow in doing good deeds, somebody who's not serious about performing good actions, don't ever think that your lineage will hasten your status with God. Your lineage will not hasten your status with God. Let me cover now each point of the hadith, inshallah ta'ala. Number 1, he who al-hathu ala tanfis al-karab anil makrubin, those the great benefit of somebody who has a shidda azima, difficulty in their life. The Messenger of God said about these people, the one who removes the difficulty from his brother, that God will remove a difficulty from him on the day of judgment. And that could be anything, especially if the person is sad, he's unwell, he's going through difficulty to lend an ear, and there are many, many ahadith on that. The second, al-hathu ala taysir ala al-mu'sir. Somebody who is in some type of financial difficulty, and one who then eases their financial difficulty, God will ease their affair on the Day of Judgment. Number three, الثالثة الحث على ستر المسلم. Number three, to cover another Muslim's sins. This is very important. The Messenger of God said in another hadith, narrated by Ibn Majah, that man satara awrata akhihi, somebody who covers the private affairs of his brother, satara Allah awratahu yawm al-qiyamah, God will cover his privacy, private affairs on the Day of Judgment. Somebody who unveils, uncovers, talks about the private affairs of his brother, God will open up his affairs. كشف الله أوراته حتى يفتح بها في بيته. Meaning, even the things that take place privately in his own home will be unveiled on the Day of Judgment. Number four, to help another Muslim. As the Prophet ﷺ said, he who helps his brother or is in aid of his brother, God will be forever in his aid. Number five, somebody who treads the path of knowledge. And this brings us back to the Quran. Ibn Rajab says, rahimahullah ta'ala, that one who takes the path, أَنَّ اللَّهَ يُسَهِّلُ لَهُ الْعِلْمِ, somebody who takes the path of knowledge, God will ease the seeking of knowledge for him. That it means that God will ease the path, meaning it will become easier for him to seek knowledge. Easier for him to seek knowledge. And it will make it easy for إِنَّ الْإِلْمِ طَرِيقٌ يُوصِلُ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ, because knowledge takes one to heaven. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ, that we have made the book of Allah easy for remembrance. The next point, those who gather together to remember the book. الحث على مدارسة كتاب الله تعالى واجتماع على تلاوته. I'll answer the question here about gathering together. Now, the Shaykh says, وَهَذَا يَدُلُّ, this hadith that we mentioned earlier about gathering together and studying and reading the Quran, يدل على استحباب الجلوس في المساجد. It's mustahab to sit in the masjid and read the book of Allah and to study it. This includes الاجتماع على تعلم القرآن وتعليمه, to study and to teach the book of Allah. ويشمل الاجتماع في المساجد على دراسة القرآن مطلقا, and to study the Quran generally speaking. Ibn Abbas was asked about this as well, what's the best action? And he said the best is to sit in the masjid and to learn the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the question you asked, can people do collective khatams? Are we allowed to do Quran khatams as a group? Now, there may be two questions there. One question may be, are we allowed to recite the Quran in one voice? I don't know if that's your question. Please do tell me if that was your question, one voice. Or are we allowed to sit together and you read juz, you read juz, you read the juz, and we make a khatm of the Quran? That's another question. I will deal with the first question. The madhahib differ over if one should recite the Quran collectively in a group. The Hanafis consider it to be makruh, to be disliked to read the Quran in a group in one voice. The Hanafis generally consider it disliked. The Malikis have a bit more leniency towards it, allowing it, saying it's fine. That's why in Morocco you'll go and you'll see collective recitations of the same surah, but you won't see that often in the subcontinent or in Turkey. People will be reading the individual portion of the Quran, even if they're reading the same portion. As for the second question, so there's khilaf on that question, on that issue. But I would argue that if it's going to encourage people to read more if they read together, then khalas, mashal hal, it's not a problem. نأخذ بقول من مذهب Malik. We'll take that position. Number two, what of people getting together to make a khatm of the Quran? Many evidences for reading the Quran to benefit the deceased. Generally, the ulama, many of the ulama of the position that khatm, that completing the Quran does benefit the dead. There are many narrations for this, and I'm going to cover some of those narrations in the hereafter when we get to talqeen, what to read when a person is passing away and what benefits him thereafter. I will cover that topic. There are many Sahaba, a particular Sahabi was passing away, and he said to his companions that when I die, please remain standing above my grave reciting Surah Al-Ra'd. So there are many other evidences, and although some scholars do differ, I'm not going to, full disclosure, there are ulama who said reading of the Quran doesn't benefit the dead. There were some ulama who said that amongst the Sunni, within the Sunni tradition, definitely, but many said otherwise. And there's a general rule within our tradition, which is when the ulama differ about a particular thing, then one cannot call it an innovation. It's a general rule that's utilized. Now, whatever position you select or you go by, alhamdulillah, it's up to you. I want to move on now to yes, to one. What does it mean to memorize the Quran, and who is one who memorizes the Quran? And I want to move to page number. In fact, no. I just want to explain that issue, and then I'll move, inshallah, to page 80, page 78, inshallah. Adab qira'ati wa matalibuha. Firstly, who is the word in Arabic for memorize of Quran is hamil. Hamil literally means one who carries, not hafid. The word hafid was originally used for hafid of hadith, the people who memorize hadith. The word hamil, and hamil has a slightly nuanced meaning. Why? Because not only does a person memorize the book of Allah, but he carries its weight, i.e., he carries the ma'ani of the Quran, the barakah of the Quran, and he follows that through with practice. So one who just memorizes the Quran and doesn't understand any of it, then there's no difference really to the Mus'haf I have in my hand, which doesn't read itself. I have to read it, and I put it on back on the shelf. And between a person who memorizes the Quran and doesn't understand any of it, you know, it's just that Mus'haf that just repeats that which, or the person repeats that which he doesn't understand. So I would make that comparison to a degree. Even those who have memorized the Quran, I would say if you've memorized the Quran, then it is wajib alaykum. It's necessary for you to learn the Arabic language and to understand the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You've done all the hard work. It will only take a year or so to get a good kind of foothold in the Arabic language. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.